Have you ever noticed Dobby just showing up at Malfoy Manor at exactly the right second, with zero explanation from the film? That's not a plot hole. It's a magical object the movies quietly deleted. We're covering magical and forbidden artifacts the films never fully explained. The two-way mirrors. That Dobby moment is the cleanest example of the franchise cutting an entire magical system and hoping nobody would ask questions. In the books, James Potter and Sirius Black owned a pair of two-way mirrors from their own school days, used back when they landed separate detentions. Say the other person's name into your mirror, and you appear in theirs. Wizard FaceTime. Decades before FaceTime existed, Sirius hands one to Harry in Order of the Phoenix, wrapped with a note that reads, "This is a two-way mirror. I've got the other. If you need to speak to me, just say my name into it. You'll appear in my mirror, and I'll be able to talk in yours." James and I used to use them when we were in separate detentions. Harry never opens it. Worried that using it might drag Sirius out of hiding, he buries it in his trunk and forgets it exists. And here's the gut punch the films skip entirely. Not long after Kreacher lies to Harry about Sirius being trapped at the Department of Mysteries, Harry believes it, and Sirius dies trying to save him. One unwrapped mirror could have checked that story in seconds. It didn't happen. After Sirius's death, Harry finds the mirror and smashes it in grief. And you'd think that's where the object dies, too. It isn't. Mundungus Fletcher, because of course it's Mundungus, steals Sirius's mirror from Grimmauld Place, and Aberforth Dumbledore, Albus's brother, ends up buying it. For most of Deathly Hallows, Harry keeps catching glimpses of a bright blue eye in a broken shard of glass and assumes it belongs to Dumbledore, watching from beyond the grave. Wrong guess. It's Aberforth. And it's Aberforth who sends Dobby to pull Harry, Ron, and Hermione out of Malfoy Manor. One of the most emotional rescues in the entire saga runs on a magical object the films never mention once. The Golden Snitch. While we're on objects doing more work than the movies gave them credit for, eye open at the close only makes sense once you know the one rule that films leave out entirely. Snitches were invented in the 1300s by a metal charmer named Bowman Wright from Godric's Hollow, built to replace the nearly extinct Golden Snidget in Quidditch. But the real trick isn't the invention, it's something called flesh memory, and Rufus Scrimgeour spells it out for Harry in Deathly Hallows. A snitch is not touched by bare skin before it is released, not even by the maker who wears gloves. It carries an enchantment by which it can identify the first human to lay hands upon it, in the case of disputed capture. This snitch will remember your touch, Potter. Read that again. Every single snitch is a biometric lock, keyed to one person, centuries before Muggles ever dreamed up a fingerprint scanner. Dumbledore leaves Harry the very first snitch he ever caught during his first Quidditch match back in 1991, snagged in his mouth of all places. Flesh memory means it opens for nobody else on Earth. When Harry finally presses it to his lips at the close, walking into the Forbidden Forest to die, it opens and reveals the Resurrection Stone. Not random magic. A locked safe that waited 6 years for the one mouth it remembered. The Deluminator. If flesh memory is magic hiding in plain sight, the Deluminator is magic hiding in your actual pocket. You know it as the little silver lighter Dumbledore uses to click the streetlights out on Privet Drive in the opening pages of the very first book. Here's a fun bit of trivia, though. It isn't even called that there. Philosopher's Stone and the Order of the Phoenix both call it the Put-Outer. Rowling only renames it the Deluminator in Book 7, the moment Dumbledore wills it to Ron, which means the object's own name got quietly retconned mid-series. None of that compares to the ability nobody sees coming. Ron abandons Harry and Hermione mid-quest in Deathly Hallows, a genuine low point for his character, and he's miserable about it. Then, he hears Hermione speak his name, and a ball of blue light shoots straight out of the Deluminator, sinks into his chest near his heart, and lets him apparate directly back to his friends, cutting clean through magical protections that should have stopped him cold. A homing beacon, disguised as a smoker's lighter. Dumbledore built a device that reads out towards a name spoken with love and drags you toward it. Good luck explaining that one to a Muggle electrician. The Marauders Map, which brings us to the Marauders Map. And here's a question worth sitting with. Do you actually know who made it? Harry taps it, says, "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good," and the films never properly credit the people behind it. Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs built it. Nicknames for Remus Lupin, Peter Pettigrew, Sirius Black, and James Potter. And according to Wizarding World's supplementary material, they used something called the homunculus charm to track the real-time location of every single person inside the castle. They mapped the interior themselves, sneaking around at night in their animagus forms under James's invisibility cloak. The films do capture one piece beautifully, its personality, and when Snape tries to force it to reveal its secrets, it fires back directly. Mr. Mooney presents his compliments to Professor Snape and begs him to keep his abnormally large nose out of other people's business. Here's a detail the fandom loves chewing over. The order of the nicknames, Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, Prongs, is the exact reverse of the order in which those four men died. Prongs first in 1981. Moony last during the Battle of Hogwarts in 1998. Intentional symbolism or pure coincidence? Nobody's settled that argument, but it's the kind of detail film-only fans never get handed to them. And here's a plot hole nobody's fully cracked. The map shows people's true identities, which is exactly how Harry eventually clocks that Peter Pettigrew is alive and hiding somewhere in the castle. So how did Fred and George stare at this map for years and never once notice Ron's pet rat Scabbers labeled Peter Pettigrew sleeping in Ron's actual bed the entire time? The Vanishing Cabinets. That's only half the story of what Borgin and Burkes has been hiding from you, because that shop in Nocturne Alley runs like a black market for objects the films never bother explaining. Take the Vanishing Cabinets. 2 of them exist, forming a pair, one in Borgin and Burkes, one at Hogwarts, and whatever you put in one appears in the other. Harry actually hides inside the Borgin and Burkes cabinet back in Chamber of Secrets, years before that detail matters again. The Hogwarts cabinet gets damaged when Peeves drops it, and the books reveal exactly how broken it is through an extremely unlucky Slytherin named Graham Montague. Fred and George stuff Montague into the damaged cabinet as a prank in Order of the Phoenix, and he manages to apparate out, but he ends up trapped in a toilet, having spent time stuck somewhere between the 2 cabinets. In his words, in limbo. That single account is what gives Draco Malfoy the idea to repair the cabinet and use it to smuggle Death Eaters into the castle. Here's a thread the books never bother tying off, though. Sirius mentions, almost offhand, that there's a vanishing cabinet sitting among the junk in Grimmauld Place. Where does it lead? Does it even still work? Nobody ever says. A live magical door somewhere inside the House of Black, and nobody ever opens it again. The Hand of Glory. Staying in Borgin and Burkes for a second, the Hand of Glory has a real-world twist that'll genuinely catch you off guard. Mr. Borgin pitches it to Harry directly, back in Chamber of Secrets. Insert a candle, and it gives light only to the holder. Best friend of thieves and plunderers. A severed, shriveled human hand. And Draco wants one before his 2nd year, but Lucius shuts that down. By his 6th year, Draco's got one anyway, and he uses it to see through total darkness when he unleashes Peruvian instant darkness powder to escape the Room of Requirement during the Death Eater attack on Hogwarts. Ron identifies it for the reader in one line. His Hand of Glory gives light only to the holder, remember? Here's the part that should genuinely mess with your head. The Hand of Glory is real, actually real. According to the Whitby Museum in North Yorkshire, an alleged Hand of Glory, the only one known to survive, turned up in the early 20th century hidden inside the wall of a thatched cottage in Castleton, and was donated to the museum in 1935. Their own display quotes Borgin's exact sales pitch from Chamber of Secrets. Even the name traces back to real etymology. The French, Monde de Gros, a corruption of mandragore, the mandrake plant, which, if you remember the screaming mandrakes from herbology, quietly links 2 pieces of lore that never seemed connected. And here's a plot hole worth raising. How does Borgin and Burkes keep the same Hand of Glory, the same cursed necklace, and the same broken cabinet sitting unsold on its shelves from Harry's 2nd year all the way through his 6th? Business must be brutal in Nocturne Alley. Salazar Slytherin's locket. This is where it gets genuinely dark, because the object with the deepest full backstory in the entire saga is Salazar Slytherin's locket, and the films hand you maybe 10% of it. Merope Gaunt, pregnant and destitute, sells the locket to a dealer named Caractacus Burke for next to nothing, and it eventually lands with a wealthy collector named Hepzibah Smith. A young Tom Riddle, working at Borgin and Burkes at the time, murders Hepzibah to steal it and frames her house elf, Hoki, by planting a false memory, all revealed in Half-Blood Prince. Riddle turns the locket into a Horcrux and hides it inside a seaside cave guarded by an army of Inferi and a potion you have to drink just to reach it. Years later, Regulus Arcturus Black, Sirius's own brother, defects from the Death Eaters, brings his house elf Creature to that cave, and drinks the potion himself so Creature can swap the real locket for a fake one and get out alive. Regulus doesn't. Creature can't destroy the real thing, so it sits in Grimmauld Place until Mundungus Fletcher steals it. And Dolores Umbridge, yes, that Umbridge, confiscates it from him and wears it around her neck as a fake heirloom she claims came from a pure blood family called Selwyn. Harry, Ron, and Hermione steal it back during their Ministry infiltration on September 2nd, 1997, and Ron finally destroys it with the Sword of Gryffindor. One object, a murdered heiress, a framed house elf, a redeemed Death Eater's suicide mission, and Dolores Umbridge unknowingly wearing a piece of Voldemort's soul as jewelry. The films compress all of that into a couple of scenes. The Black Family Tapestry. Speaking of the House of Black, that tapestry is one of the biggest pieces of world building the movies basically skip. Grimmauld Place hides a massive family tree titled The Noble and Most Ancient House of Black, with the family motto woven about it, Toujours pur, always pure. Order of the Phoenix describes it as immensely old, faded, gnawed by doxies in places, tracing back as far as anyone can tell to the Middle Ages, and Creature claims it's been in the family for 7 centuries. Disowned members get literally blasted off the tapestry, leaving small burn marks like cigarette scorches. And Sirius is one of them. His own mother, Walburga Black, blasted him off after he ran away from home. And he tells Harry directly, I used to be there. My sweet old mother blasted me off after I ran away from home. Andromeda, Sirius's cousin, got removed for marrying a muggle-born wizard named Ted Tonks. and supplementary material suggests Alphard Black was likely erased for the crime of leaving Sirius gold in his will. Here's the detail that should chill you a little. The tapestry can't be taken down. It's permanent. Sirius could reject everything the Black family stood for, run from them his whole life, and die fighting against Toujours Pure itself, and he still couldn't fully erase himself from that wall. The Whomping Willow. Not everything unexplained on this list is sinister, though. Some of it is just quietly, devastatingly sad, and that's the Whomping Willow. You've seen it in the films as basically a violent obstacle course, batting Ron's flying car around for laughs. What the movies never explain is why it's actually there. Remus Lupin lays it out himself in Prisoner of Azkaban. The Whomping Willow was planted the year I came to Hogwarts. Truth is that it was planted because I came to Hogwarts. This house, the tunnel that leads to it, they were built for my use. The entire tree exists to guard a tunnel to the Shrieking Shack, where Lupin transformed into a werewolf every single month, hidden away from the rest of the school. A knot on the trunk freezes the tree if you press it, small enough for a rat, which happens to be Peter Pettigrew's Animagus form, letting the Marauders sneak through there to join their friend. This spot is also where one of the most important deaths in the entire series began. Sirius, as a cruel prank, told Snape exactly how to get past the tree, nearly getting him killed by a transformed Lupin, and James Potter pulled Snape back at the last possible second. We'll circle back to that one. Even a student named Davy Gudgeon nearly lost an eye trying to touch the trunk, according to the books. So next time the films show the Willow smacking a flying car around for a laugh, remember what it actually is. Dumbledore's solution for letting a disabled 11-year-old attend school safely. The Sword of Gryffindor. Now for the sword everyone remembers, but almost nobody understands the actual rules of. The Sword of Gryffindor. Goblin made, around 1,000 years old, silver, set with rubies, engraved with Godric Gryffindor's name beneath the hilt, and it presents itself out of the sorting hat to any true Gryffindor in a genuine moment of need. Which is exactly how 12-year-old Harry pulls it free to kill the Basilisk in Chamber of Secrets. Here's the mechanic the films never touch, and it's the entire reason the sword matters so much in the final book. Deathly Hallows reveals that Goblin-made silver takes in only that which strengthens it. Because the sword absorbed basilisk venom during the fight, it becomes one of the only weapons on Earth capable of destroying Horcruxes. Dumbledore uses it to destroy the Gaunt Ring. Ron uses it to destroy the locket. Neville uses it to kill Nagini, Voldemort's final Horcrux, during the Battle of Hogwarts. And there's a whole ownership war the films skip completely. Professor Flitwick explains the sword was commissioned from a Goblin king and master silversmith named Ragnuk I. Goblins insist Gryffindor stole it from him. Wizards insist Ragnuk tried to steal it back and Gryffindor defended himself. And the Goblin Griphook drags this exact dispute into Deathly Hallows to justify the trio's break-in at Gringotts, arguing that Goblin-made items belong to their makers, not to wizards' families forever. Centuries of wizard-goblin resentment boiled down into one blade. The Weasley family clock. Time to lighten things up, because not every unexplained object on this list is life or death. Some of it is just delightfully weird domestic magic, starting with the Weasley family clock. You've probably seen it on screen, but the book version is way more advanced. 9 golden hands, one for every Weasley, and instead of numbers, it shows locations. Home, school, work, traveling, lost, hospital, prison, and where 12 would normally sit, mortal peril. During the war in Half-Blood Prince, all 9 hands lock on to mortal peril permanently, and Molly ends up hauling the clock around the house with her, at one point balanced right on top of a laundry basket. Dumbledore even name-checks it directly in Order of the Phoenix, calling it that excellent clock of hers. And here's a small comedic detail worth loving. Molly also owns a completely separate, one-handed kitchen clock that just tells her things like time to make tea or you're late. A family location tracker with a built-in nagging function decades before shared phone location existed, except this one also warns you when someone's about to die. A feature no Muggle app has ever needed to build. The faux glass. Sticking with objects that watch people, the faux glass belongs to Mad-Eye Moody, or at least whoever's pretending to be Mad-Eye Moody, which turns out to matter a great deal. A dark detector shaped like a mirror, showing the owner's enemies faint and shadowy at a distance, sharpening as they close in. Moody explains it casually in Goblet of Fire. See them out there, skulking around? I'm not really in trouble until I see the whites of their eyes. That's when I open my trunk. Here's the twist the films leave out entirely. The glass tracks the owner's enemies even when the owner isn't watching it. Barty Crouch Jr., disguised as Moody and completely fixated on manipulating Harry, never once notices the shapes of Dumbledore, McGonagall, and Snape sharpening in the mirror behind him the whole time, right up until they burst in and expose him. The very object meant to protect him ends up quietly narrating his own downfall. A cracked faux glass also hangs in the Room of Requirement during Dumbledore's army meetings, though Harry points out that, like every dark detector, it can be fooled. The secrecy sensor and the probity probe, which brings us to a pair of objects the books use to build real wartime paranoia, and even the films almost completely drop. The secrecy sensor and the probity probe. The secrecy sensor looks like an extra squiggly golden television aerial, and it vibrates whenever it detects concealment and lies. Moody, really Crouch Jr. in disguise, jokes that it's useless at Hogwarts because there's too much interference. Students constantly lying about about their homework, which is deeply ironic given that the man holding it is lying about his entire identity. Filch later puts these devices to work, searching students and Half-Blood Prince as the castle's security titans. The Probity Probe is a separate object entirely, a long, thin, flexible golden rod that detects concealment charms and hidden magical items, used at Gringotts and referenced directly by Bill Weasley. During the trio's break-in at Gringotts in Deathly Hallows, door guards use probity probes on everyone entering, and Harry has to confund them just to get past. Airport security scanners and lie detectors, basically, except run by goblins and wizards who already assume everyone walking through the door is up to something. The Room of Requirement. The Room of Requirement deserves its own moment here, because technically it isn't even an object. It's a room that behaves like a living, thinking, magical entity, and the films genuinely undersell how strange that is. It sits on the 7th floor, opposite a tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy, and only appears when someone walks past it 3 times while in genuine need. Dumbledore actually references it back in Goblet of Fire, telling a story about once desperately needing a bathroom and finding, in his own words, a beautifully proportioned room I had never seen before, containing a really rather magnificent collection of chamber pots, and never being able to find it again. It's Dobby, though, in Order of the Phoenix, who lays out exactly how it works. It is a room that a person can only enter when they have real need of it. Sometimes it is there, and sometimes it is not, but when it appears, it is always equipped for the Seeker's needs. Across the series, it becomes Dumbledore's army's secret training ground, Draco's private workshop for repairing that vanishing cabinet, and here's the detail film-only fans usually miss: the Room of Hidden Things, a graveyard for centuries of student contraband where Voldemort hides his diadem Horcrux, assuming nobody would ever think to search there. One hard limit is worth knowing, too. It can't conjure food. Even magic this powerful still says no to that one. Umbridge's Blood Quill. We're deep into the darker end of the list now, and few objects are more quietly disturbing than Dolores Umbridge's Blood Quill. It needs no ink because it uses yours. During detention in Order of the Phoenix, Umbridge forces Harry to write lines with it, and the books describe exactly what happens. The words had appeared on the parchment in what appeared to be shining red ink. At the same time, the words had appeared on the back of Harry's right hand, cut into his skin as though traced there by a scalpel. Yet even as he stared at the shining cut, the skin healed over again. The line she forces him to write over and over is, "I must not tell lies," which, given who's forcing it, is almost too on the nose. Hermione recommends soaking his hand in essence of murtlap to help it along. Harry hides the injury for a long stretch, and the only other evidence in the books that this is happening to other students is a brief glimpse of Lee Jordan's bleeding hand. Repeated use turns the wound into a permanent scar, one Harry later shows to a snatcher and brandishes directly at the Minister of Magic himself. Sit with that for a second. A Hogwarts professor tortured a student to extract obedience through his own blood and faced 0 consequences at the time. That's not a throwaway detail. That's carved, literally, into a teenager's hand. The Goblet of Fire's binding contract. Let's talk contracts, because the Goblet of Fire is doing more legal heavy lifting than the films ever bother to mention. It's not just a magical judge spitting out names. Once it picks you, you're bound. Dumbledore lays out the stakes directly. Once selected, a champion is obliged to see the tournament through to the end, because the placing of your name in the goblet constitutes a binding magical contract. There can be no change of heart once you have become a champion. Not even Dumbledore, headmaster of the entire school, can release Harry from it. A magical age line surrounds the goblet, too. A 10-foot golden circle that repels anyone under 17. And Fred and George famously try crossing it with an aging potion, only to get flung backward, sprouting long white beards for their trouble. Barty Crouch Jr., still disguised as Moody, uses a confundus charm to trick the goblet into accepting Harry as a 4th school, forcing him into a tournament he never agreed to enter. And here's a genuine unanswered question fans have argued over for years. The books never actually state what happens if you refuse to compete once selected. Loss of magic is a popular fan guess. Just a guess, though. The text leaves it deliberately vague. The Time Turner. Now for the plot hole that basically defines Harry Potter fans' arguments. The Time Turner, a small hourglass on a chain, and one full turn sends you back exactly 1 hour. Hermione gets a ministry-approved one in Prisoner of Azkaban, and the books are blunt about how tightly it's controlled. She had to write all sorts of letters to the Ministry of Magic so that I could have one, that I'd never, ever use it for anything except my studies. McGonagall's condition is strict, and Dumbledore's rule to Harry and Hermione is even simpler. You must not be seen. Together, they use it to save both Buckbeak and Sirius from execution. According to Wizarding World's supplementary lore, Time Turners answer to the Department of Mystery's time room, where an official named Saul Croker sets a hard limit. No more than roughly 5 hours can be relived safely. And he cites a witch named Eloise Mintumble as the reason why. She once traveled back 5 centuries, and the distortions were catastrophic. A single Tuesday stretched into 2.5 days, a Thursday collapsed into just 4 hours, and the trip killed her. Every ministry-issued Time Turner gets destroyed during the Battle of the Department of Mysteries in June 1996. And here's the question fans have been asking for 2 decades. If this technology exists, why does nobody ever use it to undo a death, or to stop Voldemort before any of this starts? Rowling has said she destroyed them deliberately so they couldn't solve future books' problems for her, which is an honest answer. It doesn't fully close the hole, though. Life debts. And finally, the entry that isn't really an object at all. It's a rule of magic so deep, even the books barely explain it. The life debt. Dumbledore lays out the concept to Harry directly in Prisoner of Azkaban, right after Harry spares Peter Pettigrew's life. Pettigrew owes his life to you. You have sent Voldemort a deputy who is in your debt. When one wizard saves another wizard's life, it creates a certain bond between them. This is magic at its deepest. It's most impenetrable, Harry. But trust me, the time may come when you'll be very glad you saved Pettigrew's life. That time comes. Years earlier, James Potter saved Severus Snape's life at the base of the Whomping Willow, after Sirius sent him toward a transformed Lupin as a cruel prank, and Dumbledore later tells Harry in Philosopher's Stone that Snape couldn't bear being in your father's debt, a line that recontextualizes practically every scene of Snape protecting Harry across the entire series. The debt that pays off the hardest, though, belongs to Pettigrew. At Malfoy Manor in Deathly Hallows, Harry reminds him that he once spared his life, and Pettigrew hesitates. Just for a second, a flicker of actual mercy, and in that hesitation, the silver hand Voldemort gave him, the one built to symbolize unwavering loyalty, turns on him and strangles him. One of the most quietly devastating deaths in the entire series, and the film cuts it completely. Dobby just knocks Pettigrew out instead, which means the life debt Dumbledore warned Harry about 6 years earlier never gets to pay off on screen at all. 18 objects. Every single one of them was hiding a rule, a history, or a body count the movies simply didn't have runtime for. So yeah, here's where that leaves us. The objects everyone thinks they already understand are usually the ones hiding the most. But if it's secrets you're after, forget the objects for a second. What about the rooms themselves? Which 9 locations inside Hogwarts were built to stay hidden, forbidden, or flat out forgotten? That's your next lesson. All 9 secret and forbidden locations in Hogwarts Castle explained.